Welcome, r/EntitledParents. Landlord advertises all of our company's equipment for sale to our competitors. Best follow our eviction to the letter. Landlord gives us 7 days to vacate our leisure business from the building. He thinks we can't empty the business during lockdown and proceeds to advertise our equipment for sale to our competition. We sell everything in 7 days and destroy the rest. Enjoy no rent and the loss of your potential buyers. I work for a leisure company. Think soft play, indoor soccer, laser tag, can't be specific. Prior to lockdown, managers and the big bosses were negotiating the renewal of the lease on one of our parks. Things were going mostly smoothly, however, the landlords were difficult to contact. Then 2020 shit hit the fan. All of our sites were closed, and everything was thrown into a mess. Negotiations began to slip down the priority list. Nobody thought the landlord would push an eviction for an expired lease during this period, especially with it still getting rent, despite the site's closure, and the closure of every business and restaurant in the immediate area. We were wrong. A few days ago we received a letter saying we had 7 days to leave the premises and take everything with us. We are reminded that anything left in the building after 7 days will become the landlord's property. That line is very important. Now a lot of construction goes into installing our equipment into a new building, which makes emptying one even harder. Add a lockdown, with no staff and most businesses shut, it meant that saving much of our assets would prove to be extremely difficult. To lose a profitable site and all of its assets is definitely a blow to our company. But here is where it gets worse. A few days into our 7-day eviction, we find out that the landlord has been advertising our park to our competitors. But he isn't offering just the building, he is offering all of our stuff pre-installed, ready to go, just needs rebranding. The landlord has evicted us from the property in an attempt to increase rent and make a solid profit from our equipment installed because he thinks we won't be able to empty the park. We were furious. And here is where the malicious compliance came in. We were told we had 7 days to move everything we owned out of the property, so that's what we did. Local businesses from all around offered up free space to store our things. A few people came back out of lockdown and they all spent the rest of the week removing, selling, or destroying everything that was related to us. We didn't even leave light fittings. In every other site vacation we have seen, we always end up leaving thousands of dollar sign worth of disco lights in the ceilings, because they are too hard to get. We leave most the construction in, as well as things like the bars and kitchens, that all stay intact, recognizable as what they once were, but not this building. We ripped up the flooring we installed, tore down the walls that were not part of the original structure, wooden walls to divide up the space, ripped apart our manager's offices, and removed all artwork and lockers. The landlord now has every new deal he has been making dead in the water, a large renovation bill to install new flooring, etc., or a company willing to do it themselves like we were. Lockdown has been extended another 4 weeks, so he has at least another 4 weeks without rent we were paying and won't have any potential buyers. Silver lining, the assets we got out of the site, fridges, TVs, equipment, food, tables, have all been sold, and the lack of rent and additional income has helped the business and paid staff wages. Update. Hi everyone. I'm so sorry for how long an update has taken. I was waiting for things to unfold. Here is what happened next. We handed in the keys, and it was probably the quickest handover we've ever had. The landlord clearly didn't want to make any kind of conversation, and there was definitely an elephant in the room, but he definitely said nothing about the lack of our equipment. Complications did arise when we went to get back various deposits, but he had no case to withhold the deposits from us as the building was in excellent shape. We had conducted much of the maintenance work ourselves, so the building was in a significantly better condition than we found it. We also cleaned up 99% of the rubbish and dirt from our demolition crusade, so he couldn't bill us for cleaning. A very minor bit of pressing from our legal team meant that we received everything owed back in full. The building is still vacant, and as of yet we don't know of any potential buyers. At this moment in time our company is still standing despite the pandemic closures and lack of business. Staff are all still employed and doing well. A huge thanks again for everyone who took the time to read this, and to those who were dedicated enough to remind me for updates. Big shout out as well to the amazing people who gave awards. I really appreciate it, and I've been making sure to pass on the good karma. This reminds me of a scumbag super I had a while back. A prospective tenant came to view my apartment and decided to take it. They asked about buying my bookshelves. I'd been planning on tossing them since they were IKEA shelves that weren't worth moving, so I offered to just leave them in the apartment for the new tenant for free. This was a win-win. They were happy to get free shelves, and I was happy to not have to deal with getting them out of the apartment. Except the super refused to let this happen and insisted the apartment had to be empty between tenants. I knew this fucker's plan was to go down to the garbage room after I took the shelves down to take them and sell them back to the person moving in after me, because he'd do highly illegal shit like take the bars off the windows of the ground floor apartments between tenants and charge to put the bars back on. So I went and bought a crowbar to break the shelves down before throwing them out. In Australia, RPM made a good point at the start of all this, which surprised me because of how fucking useless he was with the fires and flooding at the end of 2019. No one is going to be filling stores you evict during this. This landlord figured they'd make a quick buck on your equipment, and I'm so glad you completely fucked them over. People who use this situation to enrich themselves at the expense of others are absolute scum. I'm a decent sized commercial landlord, and it always pisses me off when I see other landlords trying to take advantage of their tenants or situations that are beyond their control. Tenants aren't always right, just like landlords aren't always right, but it's just good business and common sense to be fair in business. Otherwise it almost always bites you in the ass. Depending on where you are, there are laws that prevent this type of thing. You own your property, and the landlord has a duty to try and return it to you. I think where I'm at, it's something like 30 days after you leave before your property is seen as forfeit. The landlord basically tricked you into leaving and emptying most of your stuff within a week. If this is in the US, and would depend greatly by which state, I don't even think this was even legal. Where I live, any expired lease automatically becomes a month-to-month lease under the old agreement until one of the parties exits the agreement. It's important to note it becomes a month-to-month lease. A week-to-week lease requires 7 days notification. A month-to-month lease needs 30 days. I've currently lived in the same home for about 5 years now, and I've only had a signed lease for the first year. Both parties are just operating under the terms of the original lease. That doesn't even include any stays on evictions that your local/state governments may have put in effect during this pandemic. Even if they attempted to evict your business, I don't think they could've actually gotten a court to sign off on it and gotten anyone to actually remove you. Nope, doesn't smell true. Every state requires more than 7 days notice to evict. If you received a 7-day notice, it's likely the eviction process was underway well before quarantine started. Also, it's illegal to tear down the building's flooring and walls without the consent of the landlord, even if you built them. In lease agreements you specify that any improvements to the building also become property of the landlord for precisely this reason. So if that part is true, I'd expect a hefty lawsuit coming your way. You may get stuck with a construction bill for the walls and flooring, but most of the things you listed could be considered trade fixtures which do not go with the building. A 7-day eviction notice clause with no holdover? Who the fuck is doing your leases? Fire them and get a new broker before moving to a new place. They'd probably be able to advise you that stuff like walls, lights, and flooring are, generally, considered fixtures rather than trade fixtures, so even if you paid for them, they go with the building. Brace for your landlord's attorneys to contact you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit like. If you would like to see more, feel free to subscribe.